They mocked his rusty sword until the Alien Empress recognized the royal crest. The sword hit the arena floor with a sound like a dying bell, and 40,000 voices laughed loud enough to shake dust from the Colosseum's crystal ceiling. But I was not laughing, because I had spent 30 years cataloging extinction events, and something in the marrow of my four hearts told me that the sound of that laughter was the last mistake my species would ever make. My name is Vex Thalkaran, third observer to the Chorlathi Empire, and I had seen 1,000 species kneel in this arena. I had watched draconians beg. I had watched the hive minds of Siskar dissolve into screaming static when their queen node was severed. I had cataloged every possible flavor of defeat the galaxy had to offer, but I had never, not once in 3 centuries of service, seen a species smile while losing. The human knelt in the center of the sand, blood running from a gash above his eye, his armor cracked and smoking from the plasma whip that had just disarmed him. The crowd screamed for his death. The Empress herself, Shalira the Undying, sat forward on her throne of woven starlight, her 4 amber eyes narrowing with the particular hunger of a predator who has already decided the outcome. And the human, designation James Ashworth Cole, one of 600 humans brought to Chorlath Prime as diplomatic tribute after the fall of Earth's outer colonies, looked up at 40,000 jeering aliens, spat blood onto the golden sand, and grinned like he'd just won. "Is that all you've got?" he said, and his voice carried through the silent, suppressed arena because someone had forgotten, in their arrogance, that human lungs were built for screaming across battlefields long before the Chorlathi had learned to speak in anything but chemical pheromones. They had given him a sword forged 3 centuries ago by his great-great-grandfather, rusted, notched, a relic. They called it a joke of a weapon, fit only for a joke of a species. The champion who now circled him, Kraxu Voss, 7 feet of chitin and violence, undefeated in 200 bouts, laughed through his mandibles and raised his energy blade to finish it. I should have looked away. Observers were trained to remain detached, to document, not to feel. But I leaned forward in my viewing gallery, my scanning apparatus trembling, because I had just noticed something carved into the rusted pommel of that ancient sword, something my archive flagged with a priority alert so old it had been buried under 300 years of bureaucratic dust. A crest, a royal crest. And it was not human, the arrogance of empires. To understand what happened next, you must understand what we believed about humanity. When the Chorlathi Armada first breached Sol's outer defenses 43 years ago, humanity possessed no faster-than-light travel, no energy shields, no weapons capable of scratching the hull of a single cruiser. Our sensors read them as a Tier 4 civilization, barely past nuclear fission, fractured into hundreds of squabbling nations, a species so preoccupied with fighting itself that it had never bothered to look up and notice the universe was watching. "They are children playing with fire," Grand Admiral Threxus had told the Imperial Council, and I had transcribed his exact words into the official record. "They will burn themselves before we even need to intervene." We watched Earth for 11 years before the invasion. We watched their wars, their petty squabbles over borders drawn by dead men, their inability to agree on anything, climate, currency, the shape of their own future. Our analysts wrote 700 reports concluding the same thing. Humanity was too divided to ever pose a threat, too slow, too fragile, too emotional, ruled by feeling instead of logic, by love and rage and grief instead of the cold calculus that had built our empire across 9,000 systems. We were wrong about all of it. But we would not learn how wrong for another 32 years. The invasion took 4 days, not because humanity fell quickly, because our commanders, drunk on their own confidence, expected total surrender within hours and were baffled when farmers picked up hunting rifles, when grandmothers threw Molotov cocktails from apartment windows, when a species with no orbital weapons somehow shot down 40% of our first wave, using missiles built from scavenged parts and pure, spiteful ingenuity. We won, of course we won. You cannot out-innovate an empire with 9,000 years of technological supremacy in 4 days. But when the white flags finally rose over what remained of humanity's capitals, Grand Admiral Threxus made a report to the council that I still remember word for word. Because it was the first time in my career I heard fear in a Chorlathi voice. They did not surrender because they believe they are beaten, he said. They surrendered because they are waiting. No one listened. Conquerors rarely do what the Empire never saw. 30 years before the arena. A bunker beneath the ruins of Colorado. 400 meters of granite. Between the surface and a secret that would end an empire. Colonel Sarah Reyes had not slept in 6 years. Not really. Not the way sleep was supposed to work. She existed in a state of perpetual half-consciousness, running on coffee substitute and the particular fuel that comes from watching your entire species live under an alien boot and deciding, with the full and terrible clarity of grief transformed into purpose, that this would not be the end of the story. They think we surrendered, she told the 11 scientists and engineers gathered around the holotable, their faces lit blue by the projection of a design that had taken 4 years and the lives of 2 brilliant men to complete. They think this, she gestured at the ceiling, at the sky beyond it where Chorlathi patrol ships crossed in lazy, contemptuous arcs, and is the whole war. They don't understand humans. They never will. We don't know how to lose. We only know how to wait. The project was called Rook Crest, a name chosen because a rook in chess looks like nothing until the endgame, when it suddenly controls the entire board. For 30 years in bunkers beneath 17 countries, in shipyards hidden in the deepest ocean trenches, in server farms cooled by geothermal vents no satellite could detect, humanity built. Not weapons alone, though there were weapons. Terrible and beautiful things, forged from alloys the Chorlathi didn't know we'd reverse-engineered from 3 of their own. Crashed scout ships. We built networks. We built patience. We built a plan so long and so quiet that it would take 3 generations to complete. Passed down like scripture from parent to child. Hold on. Stay alive, wait for the crest. Because here is the thing the Chorlathi Empire never understood. Not in 43 years of occupation. Not in 300 years of watching 1,000 species kneel. Humans do not fight like predators who expect an easy kill. Humans fight like a species that has spent 200,000 years being hunted by things bigger, stronger, and crueler than itself and winning anyway. Ice ages, plagues, each other, at our very worst. We are the species that clawed its way up from the bottom of every food chain we ever encountered. And we did it not with claws or venom or armor, but with something our conquerors had no scanner capable of detecting: stubbornness, love, the refusal to stop. The Crest, said Dr. Elias Okonkwo, the last surviving member of the original Rook Crest founding team, laying a small rusted medallion on the holotable, the same crest, though none in that room could have known it, that would one day be carved into the pommel of a sword handed to a young man named James Cole. Isn't a rank. It's a promise. Every weapon we build, every ship, every soldier we train in secret, they all carry this mark. And when the day comes that the Empire finally sees it and understands what it means, it will already be too late for them to stop what's coming. James Cole was 4 years old when his grandmother, dying of radiation sickness from Chorlathi bombardment, pressed that same crest into his palm and told him, "This isn't just metal, mijo. This is every promise your people ever made to each other. You carry it, you wait, and when they come for you, you fight like you've got nothing left to lose. Because you don't. We already lost everything. All we have now is each other, and the choice to never ever quit." He did not understand then what she meant. He would understand it fully only when he knelt on golden sand 43 years later, disarmed, bleeding, and grinning at an empire that had no idea what it had just woken up. The arena. Kraxuvos brought his energy blade down in a killing arc, and 40,000 voices roared their approval. And I, Observer Vexthal Karin, sworn to detachment. Sworn to the cold clarity of the archive, found myself gripping the railing of my gallery with a strength that cracked the crystal beneath my claws. James Cole did not dodge. He did not run. He caught the champion's wrist with both hands, human muscle straining against Chorlathi's sinew, and for one impossible second the entire arena held its breath as a species we had dismissed as children refused to die on schedule. "You want to know why we lost the first war?" James shouted, loud enough that the arena's suppression field couldn't fully swallow it. Loud enough that I heard every word through my translator with crystal clarity. "Because we let you catch us sleeping." "But you know what the second mistake was?" He twisted. a motion too fast for Kraxu's reflexes, honed for 200 arena bouts against opponents, who fought with strength instead of leverage, and drove his forehead into the champion's mandibles with a crack that silenced the crowd. You gave us 50 years to wake back up. He tore the energy blade from Kraxu's grip mid-motion, spun and drove the champion's own weapon through the gap in his chitin armor that every gladiator in that arena knew was the one flaw in Chorlathi. Carapace design, a flaw humans had catalogued, tested and memorized in secret for 3 decades, waiting for exactly this moment. Kraxu Voss, undefeated champion of 200 bouts, fell dead on the golden sand. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever recorded in 3 centuries of service. James Cole did not celebrate. He walked, slow and deliberate, back to where his rusted sword had fallen, and picked it up with the reverence of a man lifting something sacred. He turned to face the Empress's box, and even from my gallery I could see his hands were shaking, not with fear. I understood in that moment, but with something far more dangerous. Grief, purpose, the particular fire of a man about to keep a promise he'd carried his whole life. "My name is James Ashworth Cole," he said, and his voice cracked. Just slightly, just enough that Asha, being who had spent 3 centuries believing emotion was a weakness, felt something twist behind my 4 hearts. Grandson of Colonel Sarah Reyes, great-great-grandson of the Kilbride line, who forged this sword before your empire ever knew Earth existed. You call it rust. You call it a joke. He raised the sword, and the arena's floodlights caught the crest on the pommel. The same crest carved into a bunker medallion 30 years before, the same crest that had traveled through 3 generations of hands, through fire and grief and the terrible patience of a species that refuses to die quietly. I call it a promise 3 generations of my family kept, so I could stand here today and remind you of something you should have learned 43 years ago. I did not understand in that moment what the crest meant, but I saw the Empress rise from her throne, Shalira the Undying, ruler of 9,000 systems, conqueror, who had never once stood for a gladiator match in 300 years of reign, and I saw, for the first time in my entire career, an emotion on a Chorlathi Empress's face that I had no archive entry for: fear. The Empress remembers. She descended from her throne without her guards, without her retinue, walking alone across the arena floor, while 40,000 of her own subjects sat in stunned, uncomprehending silence. She stopped 3 meters from James Cole and her 4 amber eyes, the eyes that had watched 1,000 species kneel, fixed on the crest carved into that rusted pommel. "Where?" she said, and her voice, translated through my apparatus, trembled in a way I had never heard from an empress. "Did you get that mark?" "My grandmother gave it to me," James said. "Before your bombs killed her. She said it was a promise." "That mark," Shalira said, and now the entire arena was leaning forward, 40,000 beings straining to hear an empress speak with something other than absolute command. "Is the crest of the Threxus Accord." I felt my scanning apparatus lock up entirely, because I knew that name. Every observer knew that name. It was buried in the deepest archive of our empire's history. 300 years old, sealed under a classification so absolute that even I, sworn to document everything, had never been permitted to read its full contents. 43 years ago, Shalira said, and her voice carried now, amplified by systems she commanded with a gesture, forcing every soul in that arena to hear the words that would end an empire's arrogance forever. Grand Admiral Threxus did not simply conquer Earth. He made a treaty with its surviving governments, one the Council buried, one they told me was never signed, because admitting it existed would mean admitting that humanity fought us to a standstill they could not afford to let the galaxy know about. 40,000 voices began to murmur, and I understood in that moment why the Council had lied for 4 decades. The treaty, Shalira continued, promised humanity 30 years of quiet reconstruction in exchange for their surrender. 30 years my Council granted freely, believing a broken species needed that long merely to survive. Her eyes never left the crest. They did not tell me what the humans demanded in return. Autonomy over 17 hidden regions of their own planet. Regions my Council assured me were reconstruction zones, radiation shelters, refugee camps. She looked up at James Cole. And for the first time in 300 years of Chorlathi history, an empress's voice shook with something that was not command. "Tell me what you built in those 30 years. James Cole smiled, and it was the most human thing I had ever recorded. Grief and pride and fury and love all tangled together into one expression. No Chorlathi face could ever produce. Everything you were too arrogant to imagine we could. The emotional heart." Here, Observer Vexthal Karen's private log entry, transcribed in full, because I believe I know that history must remember this moment exactly as it happened. Before the reveal, before the fleet, before the war that would follow, there was a silence in that arena, and in that silence, James Cole did something that broke every rule of Chorlathi combat theater. He knelt. Not to the Empress, not in surrender. He knelt on the golden sand, laid the rusted sword across his knees, and closed his eyes. And I watched, through sensors calibrated to detect the faintest bioelectric fluctuations, a single tear cross his cheek and fall onto the crest. "My grandmother died in this armor," he said, quiet now. So quiet the suppression field almost swallowed it, and I found myself amplifying my own receptors just to catch every word. "She carried radiation sickness for 3 years because she refused to leave the bunker, refused to stop working, because she said someone had to make sure the promise got kept. She never saw a ship, never saw a single day of what she built. She died believing it might not even work, that maybe we were fools, chasing a dream too big for a broken species." His hand tightened on the sword. "My father died holding this same sword, training soldiers in a cave system under the Rockies, telling them stories about a home they'd never seen because it had been bombed to ash before they were born. He used to say," James's voice broke entirely now, "and 40,000 aliens sat in a silence so total, I could hear my own hearts beating in my chest. He used to say that hope isn't a feeling, it's a discipline. You don't wait to feel hopeful. You choose it every single day, even when it costs you everything. Because the alternative is letting the people who died for you die for nothing." He looked up and his eyes found the Empress. And then, impossibly, terrifyingly, he looked directly into the viewing gallery, directly at me. Though he could not have known an observer sat there, though he could not have known I existed at all, and yet in that moment, I felt seen in a way 3 centuries of detached observation had never prepared me for. "I'm not standing here because I'm the strongest human alive," James said. "I'm standing here because I'm the luckiest, because 3 generations of people I loved gave everything they had, every year, every tear, every last breath, so that I could be the one who finally got to say this out loud." He rose to his feet, and the sword in his hand caught the light like something forged not from steel, but from grief transformed into unbreakable will. "We are not children you conquered 43 years ago. We are a species that has never once, in 200,000 years of existence, agreed to stay defeated. And you gave us 30 years to remember that about ourselves. I do not know how to describe, in any language my archive contains, what I felt in that moment. I had spent 300 years believing emotion made a species weak, that the Chorlathi Empire's cold, calculated conquest of the galaxy proved that logic always defeated feeling. But watching James Cole stand in that arena, carrying the weight of 3 generations of love and loss and unbroken defiance, I understood for the first time that we had never once encountered a weakness in humanity. We had encountered a fuel source we didn't know how to measure. My case, the reveal. The Empress's 4 eyes were wet, an expression I had genuinely never witnessed in 3 centuries of Chorlathi biology, when she raised her hand and the arena's massive view screens flickered to life, showing something that made 40,000 voices scream in horror and disbelief. Simultaneously, ships, thousands of them, rising from Earth's oceans, from beneath its polar ice, from hollowed asteroids in its debris belt that our own scout patrols had scanned 100 times and dismissed as inert rock, because human engineers had spent 30 years learning to build hulls from materials that mimicked stone, that fooled every sensor array the Empire possessed, hiding an entire armada in plain sight beneath the noses of an empire too arrogant to look twice. "They're already in Chorlathi." "Space," said a trembling voice over the arena's comm system. A fleet commander, I realized, breaking protocol to interrupt his own Empress because the truth could not wait another second. My Empress, they've been in Chorlathi space for 6 years. Embedded. Silent. We thought they were mining vessels. Salvage crews, refugee transports. They were waiting, Shalira said. And now she was looking at James Cole with an expression that mixed horror and something disturbingly close to respect. For the Crest to be recognized. James Cole smiled, and it was.